Hi, Christie.
Hi, Jeff.
We're recording now.
The many hours of conversation you and I have had,
Yeah.
we've had probably half of them that haven't been recorded.
You know what we should do? We should start a podcast.
You think? Let's call it the why and the buy. How's
All
that?
right.
Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of the Why and the Buy podcast. Christy, we're recording in the morning. Why would we record in the morning?
Well, because when we have the right guest, we make ourselves available whenever they are available.
Yes, we're very, very happy to accommodate our guest today. His name is Anthony Iannarino. You may have heard of him. You have probably heard of him. If you haven't, then you have now. Someone, and I told Anthony this, someone paid me a great compliment not too long ago, sent me a podcast episode with Anthony as the guest and said, Jeff, I heard this guy, and he reminded me of you. And I sent that over to Anthony, and he asked me if I was sure that was actually a compliment. And I told him indeed that it was. Anthony, I've got to tell you in person, I've said this to a lot of people. I feel like you and I share a brain, but I'm the only one that knows it. And you've been expressing some of those ideas a lot longer than I have. And I feel like I'm always just trying to catch up to you. But you're also showing me what maybe is possible for me. So thanks for doing the great work that you do.
You know, it's interesting that I think when certain truths appear, you know, they're being picked up by a lot of people at the same time. You know, and I think that's what happens is that the reality shifts and things change, and people who are paying attention and actually doing the work, practitioners, they all start to pick it up. I had an interesting conversation with someone in marketing, and they said this thing to me that I keep hearing all the time, like buyers are evolving way faster than sellers. And I'm like, it's not even close to the truth. Nobody adapts and evolves faster than salespeople, because to fail to adapt and evolve, I mean, you're not going to sell anything. And if the GDP goes up from, 19.2 trillion to 20 trillion in 2018, that $800 billion came from somewhere, and it's not salespeople not knowing how to adapt. So I think that what you're saying is that there's these new truths that emerge, and a lot of people pick up on it and write about it and talk about it and try to share what's going on with people.
I love it. So now this is the common consciousness episode of the why and the buy. And I think there's so much truth to what you just said. What's interesting to me, Anthony, is I think there's a little bit of truth in both statements, in that there is there's certainly a lot of people who are embracing adaptability and changing so that the buyer really has the best experience. But there's a smaller percentage of them. They're just getting a bigger market share. And so there are a lot of people out, a lot of salespeople who continue to approach sales in the same way. They approach customers in the same way, and they are missing the boat along the way. So it's interesting to see how the gap gets bigger and bigger over time.
Yeah, hopefully we close that gap. It's becoming tougher for people at the back end of the diffusion of innovation curve. It's the laggards. It's going to be very difficult for them to catch up. Yeah,
absolutely. So Anthony, you're a writer. You're a podcaster, you're a speaker, you host conferences, you've got the Outbound conference coming up here in a month or so in Atlanta. What's the long-term vision for you? Where does all of this take you in the future?
It's a great question. And I do not ever pretend to be able to know where the future takes me. All I know is that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm doing what I love doing. And as long as I get to continue doing those things, I'm happy. So I'm going to keep writing. Right before I jumped on this call with you, I had just written 2,500 words for book number 3, which will come out in October. So I'm absolutely going to keep writing. And I've already sat down with the publisher and shown them the next 5 books that followed the first 2. And we have an agreement on a few of them, and we have a disagreement on a couple others. They want to keep me very solidly locked where I am, and I have some other things that I want to share. So we're having that discussion where I'm promising them that I'm not going to try to write Harry Potter or a John Grisham novel. but I do have some other things I feel like I have to write and share. I'm absolutely going to keep speaking. I'm going to keep doing what I do because it's your show's called The Why and the Buy. I feel like I'm doing what I was put here to do. So where it takes me, I don't know. You always think something like, well, this event, when this happens, then this will be where I'm at. And then this thing happens. And it's just, it's a continuum. You just keep going and one thing leads to the next and takes you different places.
That's a really interesting perspective. Again, of course, I share it. But the idea, how do you go about setting goals for yourself when sometimes you don't have a perspective for what those goals should be? I mean, there are some salespeople who are starting out, and someone pulls a number out of thin air and says, "You need to sell this much this month or this year," and or we're going to look in another direction. And they don't even have a concept for what those right things are. You've been doing this now for several years, writing every day, and you've been running businesses longer than that. You've got a context and a concept for what is right. But when you say, "Look, I just know that I'm in the right place. I'm doing what I'm doing," who knows 3, 5, 10 years ahead where I'm actually going to be or how I'm going to be utilizing the content that and the thought process that you're working through. But I know that every day I need to get up and write. I know that there's 5 books out there. I don't know entirely what they look like yet, but I've got an idea. How do you continue to just move forward on a daily basis when we're such a results-oriented profession?
I write about this a lot. I think disciplines are greater than goals. I mean, I think you should have a goal. You should have a target, but I think it's the discipline that moves people forward and not the goal itself. A lot of people have unmet goals. The first part of your question, though, is interesting to me. I'm reading Jordan Peterson's new book, 12 Rules. And the second chapter, he basically talks about, it's the second or third chapter, about not comparing yourself to other people, because that's the source of misery when you compare yourself to others. And I think that that's incorrect. And I think if you're a negative person, if you're pessimistic, if you lack self-confidence, if you don't love yourself at some level, if you don't like yourself at some level, one of my favorite things I ever heard Brian Tracy say is get up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, "I like myself, I like myself, I like myself." And when I heard it, I thought that's the strangest thing, but he's right. You do have to like yourself, but if you're pessimistic, then comparing yourself with someone else is going to be a miserable experience for you. But if you're an optimistic person, if you're a person who is driven or being driven by something inside you, how do you know what you're capable of? You don't, because most of us massively underestimate what we're really capable of, unless you look at other people and say, "Look at that guy. He's not smarter than me. He doesn't have any advantages that I don't already have, but yet he's producing results way outsized compared to mine. How is that happening?" And you take a look at it and you get a vision to say, if that person's capable of this, certainly I'm capable of the same thing. And I think you have to look at goals and say, if one person is capable of producing a result as a human being, then another person is likely capable of producing the same result. So, okay, you're probably not going to be LeBron James, and you're not, I'm not. But some kid is going to be LeBron James or better than LeBron James. And he's looking right now at James as the model for what am I capable of? And as a salesperson, I would say the quota is somebody else's opinion of what they need you to do so that they make their number. That has nothing to do with what you're capable of. It has nothing to do with you at all. It's an arbitrary goal and an arbitrary number that somebody gives you so that they get what they want. You're capable of far more than whatever your quota is. And when you see people that are 278% a quota, you realize it has nothing to do with the number. It has to do with what they believe they're supposed to be doing and what they want. And I think that goals are critically important. I have goals. I have goals in a whole bunch of areas of my life. But ultimately, I set the goal and then I just decide what disciplines get you there. So for me right now, finishing a book, the first thing I did this morning is sat down at the computer and I typed 2,500 words for the book, because it's the discipline of writing that finishes a book. The goal to write a book doesn't do anything for me. Actually, the deadline does quite a bit for me.
Yeah, I can believe that.
The deadline is more of a motivating factor than the goal of writing
and the
the book.
accountability partner and the publisher too, right?
The publisher insists on having a book by a certain date because they have a bunch of deadlines. But the fact of the matter is, I wrote the first book without a publisher. I wrote the book because I wanted to write a book, and I didn't have a publisher when I sat down and wrote the book. The second book, I had a deadline, and I had a deadline that got moved up a couple months, but I had a deadline, and I already knew I was writing the book anyway. And whether I have a publisher or not, I don't need that. I'm going to continue to write, and they know this. I'm going to write the books that I need to write to share what I think people need to know to produce better results with or without them, probably with them. But ultimately, the outcome for me is to give people something that helps them produce better results. And a book is a good form for doing that. And the goal is to help people produce better results. The book is one way. The blog is another way. YouTube is another way. But that's the long-term goal, is to help people get better outcomes. The disciplines are what get you there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And what that's actually something that I've learned in a very short time, just with focusing this year on just a handful of things that I know I can do every single morning. And in the short term, really the short length of time that I've been paying attention to that, looking at the way it has opened up the rest of my days, my weeks, my months to accomplish more that I didn't even know was there. I mean, I used to tell people that, I don't have the attention to sit down and read a book. So I listen to them on audible.com, or I listen to podcasts, or I just don't read that much. And when you focus on the most important things and you get those things out of the way, it's amazing how much noise you have in the rest of your day. And then all of a sudden it's like, I might actually sit still for a little bit and knock out a few pages. And it's just a step at a time. And I think the perspective of goals versus disciplines is, I mean, we could spend hours talking about that. And but I do want to talk about that book, especially the most recent one. You were nominated for an 800 CEO Read Award, and which is very prestigious. Congratulations on that. The Lost Art of Closing. I listened to that book, and I love that you read your own books, by the way. I mean, we've spoken a few times, and I can hear you speaking when I read, but to actually hear you speak the words, I always think it's really powerful when an author reads their own work because the emphasis is on the right places. But I love, first of all, it's very clever that the conclusion of one chapter is a close that moves you into the next chapter. So kudos to that. But what I noticed about the way you approach closing is that you approach closing from the very beginning of the process to the end of the process. So what some people would call prospecting, you've referred to as closing. And I think it's very similar to how when I speak about prospecting, there's a lot of closing in prospecting. And I think sales is such a very a circular process. Like if I could write a sales book that was a circle that didn't have a beginning or an end, and you just kind of went from one chapter in another and never stopped, I think that'd be probably pretty appropriate. What is it? I mean, and you talked about this kind of an awareness of practitioners. I mean, do you think we're getting to a place where where sales is less of a linear process?
It's completely nonlinear. I mean, and I think that's the part that is really troublesome for people right now, is that they don't understand that it's nonlinear, because we have these slide decks where target is on the far left of the slide, and then we go to qualifying, and then we go to discovery, and then we do solution design, and then we present and propose. And then we've got the buyer's journey. They've had an awareness, a recognition of a problem. And it all starts on the left and ends at the right. And then to be super clever, we line these two things up on top of each other to say, look, we can just align with the buyer's process, as if the buyer actually has a process. And they don't really have a process. If they do, it's an RFP, and that's really not a good process. That's a process to avoid allowing someone to have a preference in a relationship that gives them a competitive advantage, which is exactly the wrong thing to do. And I've challenged people with this concept before, but I'll challenge them again here. If that's the right thing to do, then your company, your sales organization, the salespeople that you have in the field as a company should also only be responding to RFPs. And they should not be out trying to get in front of deals and create a preference and a relationship that allows them to produce better results. So it doesn't make any sense. It's gone nonlinear though, because the buyer has a very difficult world that they live in now. The couple changes that have really dramatically shaped sales. I know there's a lot of talk about digital, but I don't think that really plays into the real challenges that buyers have. It's one thing that you can look at that really doesn't tell you as much as some other things. There's no more budget. There's not a way to go and say, is there a budget for this? Because a lot of what we're selling, they're already spending money in that category. We're doing a competitive displacement, or it's important enough that they could find the money if they want to do it. There's no more authority anymore. That's been dispersed among a group of people, all of whom can say no, and none of whom can say yes by themselves. So when you ask the buyer, what's the process that you're going to go through to make this decision? They're clueless. They don't have any idea what's going on. A lot of the need, we're actually creating the need. And this is sort of the concept that Challenger, produced in 2011 that got people's attention. And because it is a certain truth that's going on, they're comfortable in the status quo. They've already learned to live with the devil that they know. And you have to show up and be a devil that they don't know and actually compel that change. So even the idea of qualifying at all, the way that we've talked about it, doesn't work. And time bound, and I'll do it in May and I'll do it in July. There's no big difference for me. There is for you as the salesperson. But it's the decision-making process that's gotten difficult for them. And CEB put an article in HBR called the B2B Sales Imperative. And I had a chance to chat with them about that on my podcast. And basically giving clients more information makes them more confused. And when they make a decision, they feel like they didn't make the decision right no matter what. And they have buyer's remorse and they're wondering, did we even do the right thing here? And it turns out that being prescriptive and explaining to them how to buy and helping them buy and giving them strong opinions and strong direction actually makes this process easier for them. When you look at the lost art of closing, it's really 10 commitments, or what Neil Rackham would have called advances in spin selling, except he didn't really define what those advances were. And I took the liberty of paying attention to what the advances were and then wrote them down. I mean, and that's what it is. They have to make these commitments. They have to explore change. They have to commit to changing. They have to collaborate and allow you to configure some solution that's going to work for them when they put it in place. They have to commit to building consensus on their team and spending the money and reviewing proposals and letting us resolve their concerns. And without those, they don't make good decisions. But they don't know this because no one's ever told them, you're going to make bad decisions unless you go through all these steps. So somebody has to step up and go first and say, look, if we want to do this, if you want to do something that's going to give you change, we're going to have to talk about having a certain set of conversations that get us there. And those conversations are completely nonlinear. It's one of my favorite quotes. I just put it in my deck. It's from Neil deGrasse Tyson. And he said, as soon as humans enter anything, it immediately goes nonlinear. And that's why physics is easy and sociology is difficult. Once human beings get into any kind of a process, now it's completely nonlinear. And we have all these external forces going on. While we're having a discussion about change, there are companies making an acquisition or being acquired. Stakeholders are leaving. They're getting moved into other roles. Priorities are shifting. Politics are being played. So it's a very difficult environment. I think of all the things that give salespeople a tougher time, one, it's compelling change. Two, it's understanding how to help the buyer go through that process. And you see a lot of stuff about digital driving this. It's not really digital that drives any of this. It's really more of how do they make good decisions about their business now, and what are they doing to accommodate that.
So that's a really deep conversation to be able to go through that list of commitments with a client. What's your strategy for getting to that conversation? So I know that things are on a layered basis, but you have to build the trust in order to earn the right to get their attention. So what do you recommend for clients when you're working with them one-on-one?
I would go exactly the other direction.
Okay.
That's how you earn the trust. You earn the trust by knowing what comes next. And I have a framework for value creation I call level 4 value. And it's 1 is product, 2 is experience, 3 is tangible results or ROI, and 4 is strategic. You don't try to earn your way to 4. by going through 1, 2, and 3. You show up as 4. And if you show up as 4, then you've defined yourself as a trusted advisor, somebody who's consultative and a peer. If you show up as 1, I'm immediately going to say, oh, you're going to tell me about your company. You're going to tell me about your products. You're going to tell me about features and benefits. I got somebody like you. I don't need that. I think that you earn the right by showing up and knowing that and starting the conversation there. I don't think that the trust comes first and then you have this conversation. This conversation builds the trust. And this is, I think, a paradigm shift for how salespeople have approached selling. You have to come in already occupying that space.
Okay, so if you're listening right now, stop what you're doing, hit the 30 seconds backward button twice, and re-listen to that portion again, and then probably do it again, and then probably do it again, because the overwhelming majority of salespeople out there are starting at that level 1. Here's my thing. This is what it does. This is what it might mean to you. Here's the brochure, and my business card is stapled to it. I'm ready to take your order as soon as you're ready to give me your credit card information. And that's not selling. And I think the reason that so many people are concerned that the robots are going to take over all these sales jobs is that those sales jobs that the robots can take over are not nuanced or unique enough to be irreplaceable. And sales is a thoughtful process. And, Anthony, I know you were on the Catalyst Sale podcast. Mike Simmons is a friend of the show and a friend of ours, and really enjoyed your appearance there. But, Mike's another one of those guys who is on the same wavelength as us, that it's very nonlinear. It cannot be just one foot in front of the other all the time. There has to be an awareness and a presence and a consciousness of where we are in these things. And the buyer doesn't need you to go through features and benefits. If your website or your brochure could sell the product, then you wouldn't have a job as a salesperson. So taking it beyond level 1, level 2, level 3, and going right into here's something that you didn't know you could take advantage of. Because no one has told you about this product or this service. And I'm here to not only demonstrate what that product is, but what it means for you at a later date. You want to talk about outcomes that you've never considered before? Here's your opportunity. And now you've created context in a way that has never been created before. And that's an engaging conversation that someone who's motivated to grow their own business is going to want to have versus here's another salesperson just knocking on my door. Why do you think people have such a hard time grasping that concept? Or is it just that human beings are slow to adopt a change and they don't see the benefit of it?
I mean, of course, there's lots of different reasons for different people. I mean, some people are tremendously conflict averse. And so coming in and telling the client that there's something that they don't know, they may lack the confidence or the competence or both, or just be conflict averse and don't want to challenge anybody's perspective on their business. I've heard salespeople say they know way more about their business than I do. Well, I'm like, well, then you're unnecessary. They don't need you. I mean, you have to know the intersection of your business and their business better than they know the intersection of your business and their business. You're working with hundreds of people to create value. So you have an understanding, or what I call situational knowledge, that's way deeper than theirs. They're only doing what they do in one company. And they don't have a perspective of what it looks like and what kind of trade-offs are being made. The other reason is that a lot of people think that I love my company, I love my product, we're the very best, and I can't wait to tell you about it, because that should be enough to compel you to change and differentiate me from everybody else, because we're just that good. And to the client, like, everybody says that. The interesting thing about this is, if I were to take a salesperson from company A and give them the deck from company B, they'd do fine. They could walk through the deck of their competitor without any real challenges. And, it's a very different bar and a different hurdle to say to a salesperson, you have to have information disparity. You've got to be able to know things that your prospective client doesn't know. You've got to have a strong bias and opinion about those things. You've got to know what is right and what is wrong in certain scenarios. If you're going to be the trusted advisor, I continually tease people with this. You only need two things: trust and advice. And if you don't have the advice, you're not the trusted advisor. The advisor actually has advice and things that they're going to recommend. And I hear people say some things like, you need to be impartial. No, you need to be very partial to what the right answer is, very partial. And if the right answer is not you, then you need to disqualify the client. But you should be very, very partial to what you believe is the right answer and how to produce better results. And you should walk in occupying that space, which means I show up as a 4, I show up as a trusted advisor. I've got insight that you don't have, and I'm going to share something with you that's going to cause you to rethink your business in some way.
If you like us, tell us. Send us a message at The Why and the Buy on Twitter, or leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you got this podcast.
Jeff and I are beyond excited that you choose to spend your time with us each week. We'd love to hear from you. And we thank you again for your support and for your connection. So, Anthony, when we talk about trusted advisor, and we've had that conversation with others in the past, the big challenge is that a lot of our listeners are starting out in their career, or they're new managers moving into a role where they're now coaching other sales reps or sales professionals. And that path to trusted advisor seems to be eluding them. So what's the process that you can go through to really start moving down that path of growth?
You've got to read, you got to listen, you got to study. I mean, I wrote this last week because it's just probably the idea I'm the most hot on right now is how do you become a 52% SME? And a 52% SME is the SME that knows half of what every SME on their team knows. And if it's technical, I can get through the first 2 levels of conversation with anybody on earth because I know it so well. I know what outcomes we're driving. I know basically what kind of trade-offs you're going to make. And if it gets too technical, I can bring a real SME. But you have to know things. So you have to understand what's going on in the environment that causes people to change. I continue to use this example because it's bigger than people think it is. 11,000 baby boomers retire every day in the United States. That's 4.3 million a year going on to Medicare and Medicaid. That's 4.3 million open jobs just to stay even that have to be filled by people that have 30 years in a certain position. And now you have to refill that position with a millennial who does not have 30 years, probably has a man bun and a big beard, and probably has a different relationship with work than the person whose job they're taking. Maybe they want to bring their dog or their parrot to work with them and they think they should be able to do something like that. You have to think about these things. And so this is a massive change. And Jeff, you talked about robots. I mean, if you're a truck driver, you have a few years left driving trucks. You're going to have to figure out something else. And there will be other jobs. I don't think that truck driving goes away and there's not jobs for people to do. Certainly there's going to be a lot of work that's created because there are autonomous vehicles. People are going to change roles. But the fact of the matter is that's coming. And you can look at it and say, automation is coming. Robotics, that's coming. The ability to just decide to order something and speak into a speaker in my home and have it delivered to me is here. It's here now. And for some reason, I made the mistake of giving my daughter my account for Amazon Prime Now. I don't know if you know what Prime Now is. Prime Now is an app where if you're in a city where they'll deliver something to you in 2 hours. And now I have an American Express bill with $180 worth of mascara and other makeup.
That stuff's expensive, Anthony.
It's expensive. I know. I paid for it. And she can order it and have it delivered to the door, within an hour. That's the world that we live in. So what impact does this have on other people's business? I just pulled a few factors, but you have to look at that and say, what should be causing people to change? Why should they change now? What do we know about that? How do we help them make decisions and trade-offs? How do we help them find new opportunities? How do we help them avoid risks? And if you walk around with a notebook and you start jotting down, what are the questions that are being asked? Who's asking them? What are the answers? If you listen to CNBC in the morning instead of Howard Stern, which is a tough adjustment for me personally, because I would rather be entertained than educated sometimes, but educated ends up being a better long-term play. You listen to CEOs talk about their business. One of my favorite shows I ever heard was Reed Hastings on CNBC, and they said, "Sir, we're curious about your business model. You send DVDs by mail. Aren't you worried about the internet disrupting your business?" And he said, "Yeah, we thought about that. That's why we named the business Netflix and not DVDs by mail." He knew that this is coming, and he was positioning a company to take advantage of that. many, many years before Netflix was Netflix. And if you're listening, you're hearing these things in real time and you're paying attention to them. And if you pay attention, you start to recognize that there are certain things that are going to impact your client's business, whether they're political and legislative, they could be legal issues, they can be cultural issues. There are people right now, I mean, I'm not downplaying digital altogether. If I can't go to your website and get the answer that I need, I have a problem with you as a business right now. If you don't have a YouTube video with a walkthrough of the problem that I'm having, you failed me. And I'm unhappy with you that you just didn't put the walkthrough video up so I didn't have to read the directions. I could just use whatever it is that you sold me. All of those things matter. And so you can look at your client through that lens and say, what should they be doing now? What are they going to need to do over the next 18 to 36 months? And then how do I help them get there? But you do have to read and be thoughtful and pay attention and develop a point of view and talk to clients and get smarter. You can't show up as a know-nothing anymore.
Well, and I totally agree with you that digital is real. I just don't believe that it's necessarily the reason that all of this stuff has changed. It's come about at a time when it's made more things possible, certainly. But, there's everything now when you look, and I'm just consciously spending less time looking, but you have to tailor everything exactly to, be as specific as possible so that when people are looking for that thing, they find you instead. And it's like, well, wait a second. I mean, it's what about showing people what they don't know? Like the assumption that the buyer knows what they need and then they just go out to make a purchase is a very dangerous place to live in if you're trying to run a business. It's one thing if you're Amazon or you're Walmart or you're Google and you have everything. So just put yourself in that place all the time by having that. My house isn't that big, Anthony. I don't know about yours, but I don't have a warehouse capability for everything under the sun, right? So, working people, we need to understand how we can then help our prospects, our customers take that next step. And I think part of that is a huge part of that is understanding why you're different so that you can position yourself as someone who's valuable rather than relying on that difference being the one thing that someone is looking for. How do you, you create stuff every day and you publish things every day. How else do you go about differentiating yourself, and how do you advise people to differentiate themselves out in the marketplace?
I think you have to look at it in through a certain lens, and that lens is not necessarily how am I different, but how am I different in a way that actually makes a difference. And I think that's it. So being different by itself isn't enough. It has to actually make a difference for someone else. So what do you do different? How does that thing that you do different produce a different result? What things do you not do because other people do it and it causes them to continue to have systemic challenges that they can't overcome? So I think it's really important to look at it through the lens of what makes you different in a way that makes a difference. And I think for me personally and what I do as a speaker and the things that I do as a content creator, I'm a practitioner, and I don't research. The research I have is field research. It's not research where I'm running a survey. I read everybody's content. I mean, I read the Rain Group's report last week on just how many stakeholders take cold meetings and end up buying, and it's something like 70%. Totally counter to all the BS that you read on LinkedIn specifically. When you ask buyers, you find out they take a lot of meetings cold. That's where they come from. They're not out dialing up salespeople because they saw them on LinkedIn. It is not happening at the level that people would have you believe. But I think it's important for you to say, I have a point of view about what's right and wrong. And I am specifically biased that these solutions make more sense in this case, and these make more sense in another case. And I can tell you the difference in how you do things different and why. And I think that matters a great deal. And I write as a practitioner. And the reason that I looked at the number yesterday, I was on my website, there's 103,000 people that have subscribed to the blog daily. And to me, that was an enormous number. I mean, it's an enormous number, but I think it's because the differentiator for me is it's not research, it's not theory. I'm writing what's practical and tactical today. And when I speak to organizations, I'm entertaining and I'm educational. And what I give people is practical and tactical. And I don't think that people should leave and not know how to do something. So in both of the books that I've written, I've given you the things to do, specifically because I want somebody to read the book and go, I know what to do with this. And I've always been frustrated when I read books and the concept was great, but there was no hint at execution because I was supposed to pay that person to get the ability to execute. And I that's my bias. So I want to give you a book that you can execute. I want to give you an idea that you can execute. And that to me is the most important thing. Can you do something with this? Does it help you? Does it serve you? But coming back to your central premise here, you do have to know what makes you different. And you do have to be able to say, we do this way instead of that way because it produces a better result in this case. And if this is the case that you're having, if this is the fact pattern that we're looking at, this is why this produces a better result and why we do it this way. Or this is why you need to invest more. And this is why the price is higher, is because doing it the other way is why you have the challenges you have now. And by investing more, that challenge will go away because we can do this instead. So I think all of these things are important ideas. But if you don't do this and you don't have the insight and then what I call situational knowledge and the business acumen, it's very easy to look like me too and sound like me too. And when you look and sound like me too, the client decides you're a commodity. And if you're a commodity, they treat you like one.
Yeah, no question. So, our listeners are going to hear this in the middle of March. And in the early part of April, you're going to be in Atlanta for the Outbound Conference.
And so are you.
Yes. Well, I'm always in Atlanta, but I will be at the conference as well. Not on stage, but there to absorb as much as I can. And I'm interested in knowing what will our listeners, what can they look forward to at that event?
It's such a different experience. So the first thing, I was actually sitting in a sales kickoff meeting, getting ready to speak, and I had my laptop taking notes in front of me, and I remembered Inbound at that point in time because I kept seeing their stuff go by on the web, and I just thought I had this thought that I was struck by: how many people never get to go to a sales kickoff meeting? How many people never get that experience? How many don't get a big conference where they get to see speakers that come in and share insights and give you workshops? And as soon as I thought it, I went out to a domain service and I bought outboundconference.com. And then because I'm overzealous, I bought Outbound Boston, Outbound Chicago, Outbound Atlanta. I bought all the outbounds.
You covered your bases.
I covered all of them. And then I bought years. I bought Outbound 18, 19, 20, all the way deep into the future, because I fell in love with the idea of there's a bunch of people who don't get to do this, and it's unaffordable for them to go to a lot of conferences. And as soon as I finished speaking, I called Jeb Blunt and I said, I got this idea. We're going to do a conference called Outbound. And it's the exact opposite of Inbound. Instead of talking about waiting for people passively and reacting to your content to raise their hand, we're going to talk about going out and introducing ourselves to strangers, that we're going to interrupt people. We're going to share messages of value. And he said, that is the greatest idea you've ever had in your life. And I hope he's wrong about that, but I'm not sure he is. So far, it's been really good. The way that we set this up is the four of us do a keynote and a workshop on day one. If you show up at Outbound, each one of us will keynote for 45 minutes or something like that. And then in the afternoon, we'll each do a 30-minute workshop that's, again, practical, tactical. How do you leave and do something that you're not doing now to produce a better result around prospecting, building pipeline, and being more productive with your time? I tend to be the productivity guy in that workshop segment, but we may switch it up a little bit this year. The second day, there's training tracks. And so in the training tracks, you're going to work with one of the four of us, and we've also invited Deb Calvert, Sherry Levitin, James Muir, and Larry Levine to come in and talk about some other aspects of prospecting. So you get a different flavor than just the four of us. And that is the conference. There's no MC. It's very, very fast paced. I think the thing that most people recognize that it was a different kind of conference. The energy is very, very different. The speed is very, very different. The notebooks will get filled up really fast. It's so practical and tactical. And more than anything else, it is so much fun because the four of us we started this thing as a mastermind group. So we have this mastermind group and we know each other and we love each other. So there's going to be a lot of busting chops and a lot of teasing and a lot of playfulness that you probably won't see anywhere else because it's an unserious thing. We're giving you serious content in an unserious way.
I love it. And I love the fact that we're going to walk away with some actionable steps that we can put into practice right away. So I'm really looking forward to it. So if it's not sold out by the time this episode airs, that event is taking place on April 11th and 12th, correct?
Correct.
In Atlanta. And you can go to what website of all the ones that you mentioned can
just one. There's only one that links there, outboundconference.com.
Outboundconference.com. Excellent. I love it. So Anthony, tell me what's your why?
I wrote this newsletter last week, got me about 100 emails back because I said, I don't think that the Apple thing was start with why. I don't think it was. And I know Sinek's work and he's extremely bright. He's extremely articulate. And he's one of the people that, if you said, whose brain would you want if you didn't have yours? His would be a pretty good brain to take. I mean, he's got a good brain. There's no doubt about it. And I just recognize that the why is a part of the who. And Apple never says to you, we're different. We make beautiful products that are easy to use. You should buy from us. Instead, they show you these white headphones. And when the first iPod came out, there was this ad of a silhouette on color with white headphones. And there's absolutely 0.0 reason that you need headphones to be white. They've always been black. The black cable was fine. There's no greater fidelity using these. The sound isn't better. They don't last longer. If you walk around with these connected to your phone, you probably ripped them apart. They're no more durable. There's no reason to have white headphones except it says, I'm different. And they're speaking to the who. So they're not speaking to, you should have the same why that I have. And they're speaking to the who are you, and I'm different and I'm special and I've got these white headphones, which is why Beats came out and immediately went to red headphones, right? Now you've got red cables because now I can tell who you are and you're an audiophile and you've got what you consider to be the best headphones available because I can see the red thing. So I know what's important to you. I think a lot of this stuff is identity. And I've spent a lot of time deciding what I'm going to do. They say things like, your work needs to provide you with purpose and meaning. You need to provide your work with purpose and meaning. It works the other way. You decide what you're here to do. No one else decides what you're here to do except you. And when you fall in love with something, that's what you do. And so I'm in love with my who. And I'm here to share ideas that help people produce better results. And if you want to say the why is I'm here to help people produce better results, I would tell you that's okay. I'd take that as a why. But I'm just doing who I am. That's it. This is who I am. And what I do is just part of who I am. It doesn't work the other way for me.
That's really
very
profound.
Authentic.
Yes, very much. So how can we find you, Anthony? How can our listeners? I mean, I know how I found you this morning.
I was going to say, I'm hard to find. The best place is thesalesblog.com. And that's where I write and publish every day. After that, I would try youtube.com/Iannarino. That's the vlog that's not quite daily. I think I ended up doing 234 videos last year. So pretty close to daily. And of course, I'll connect with you on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever makes sense.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing what you have today with our audience, with us. And you've been very influential in ways on me, in ways that we probably haven't talked about. And maybe one day we'll get to talk a little more about that. But my newsletter goes out on Sundays too, because you told me to do that, because Chris Brogan told you to do that. And
correct.
And I get a lot of traction that way. And people are like, why Sunday morning? I'm like, what else are you doing on Sunday morning?
Right.
And it's amazing. Of the people that open that newsletter, it's probably 60% of them open it within the first hour. that it's out there. And some wait till Monday morning because it goes to their work email address or whatever. But I just thank you so much for doing what you do, for setting the example of showing us what is possible by just doing it. And
well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
It's been very, very impactful to me. So I pay close attention. So
yeah, I just have to second that. Thank you so much, Anthony, for your time. And I look forward to seeing you here in a couple of months in Atlanta.
Absolutely.
It'll be a lot warmer.
Yes, so that won't be hard to do. I think it's like 11 degrees here or something today.
It's bitter. Yeah. Even I'm not out there.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
You're welcome. If you guys like this episode and you want more like it, then please subscribe, do something, give us a review, give us a star, give us a thumbs up, shoot us a message at info@thewhyandthebuy.com. Let us know what you like, and we'll give you more of it. Christie, Anthony knows who he is, and that's a distinct key to knowing his why.
Absolutely, because when you know your why, your hows and your whats get much better. Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you next time.
I've told you twice. I told myself it doesn't matter.
99% of your success is rooted in your understanding and subsequent mastery of the fundamentals. I don't care what it is that you're doing. I was introduced to the fundamental principles of sales when I read Jeffrey Gitomer's Little Red Book of Selling back in 2005. I actually bought it and gave it away 4 or 5 times before I finished it myself. Now Christie and I want to give you something. All of those lessons and so many more are now interactive and available online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year on the Gitomer Learning Academy. It has never been easier or more accessible to invest 10 minutes a day in your sales success. Go to GitomerLearningAcademy.com to check it out and send us an email to gla@thewhyandthebuy.com and we'll get you set up with a free 2-week trial. Christy and I were looking for a house band for the podcast, and we were told the Roots were busy. So we found the next best thing. They're called Haskins, and they are gigging regularly in southeastern Michigan and all the time at haskinsmusic.com. Go check them out.
You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.